And it's very close to the mics, folks.
Hosted by Karen Testament, founder of First Principles New Hampshire, organization that promotes those truths that are self-evident
You look taller.
to the state and the nation of
I wish I were.
The show takes a look at the latest news and developments throughout the state of New Hampshire from a conservative women's viewpoint. Whether it's family, economic, or current news, we hold these truths. We'll cover it all. Join the show. Give us a piece of your mind or your input by calling 816-0019. It's We Hold These Truths.
Stand by.
Good morning, Nashua. It's one of those early summer, well, actually we're still in spring, technically, until the 21st of June. But it's one of those summer kind of days where it starts out overcast and cool, and then it burns off and it starts to get very warm. It's already starting to get warm out there, but this is a great time of the year. It's beautiful, light breeze. This is Karen Testerman with We Hold These Truths on WSMN 1590 Nashua Source for News and Talk. And I have to tell you, I can't get more perplexed about what's going to come out in the news next. You know, I get extremely frustrated in talking to various people about, well, while I don't think we should be trying anybody in the media, I sure don't think we should be giving away our prized possessions, if you can call them prized possessions, endangering our country by giving terrorists their free rein once again. So that being said, the other thing that I have to continually bring forth is the fact that we have that wonderful King Harry, or so he thinks he's King Harry, in the U.S. Senate, who has dubbed our patriots, our American patriots, many of whom were our prior military, as domestic terrorists. And I really do think that it's time that he takes them off of that list, because by dubbing them so, he really did attack them, gives them a terminology that is really a criminal offense. And so if he's going to do that, he needs to either justify it or rescind it, make an apology for it. And I'm calling on Jean Shaheen especially, but our senatorial delegation, our senators should be asking to sanction him, because he should not be making those kinds of remarks. At that's enough of my soapbox for this morning. But we do have something going on in Oklahoma. Hooray, Oklahoma just signed into law a refusal to cooperate with Common Core. And I know many of you in the listening audience are very, very interested in Common Core and are fighting hard to combat it here in the state. I know we've had Sandra Stotsky in state a few times talking about it, along with a couple of other people as well. Well, this morning we are privileged to have Dr. Duke Pesta, is it, in the audience, and he is from the Freedom Project Education Academy, is it? He's the director there, and Dr. Pesta received his master's in Renaissance literature from John Carroll University and his PhD in Shakespeare and Renaissance literature from Purdue. Wow! And so now he's tied up in Common Core. That's quite a leap, let me say, downward, unfortunately. But he's taught at major research institutes and small liberal arts colleges, and has been active in education reform, developing and implementing an elective Bible course that is currently available for public high school students in Texas. He is a professor of the English at the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and the academic director of Freedom Project Education. And so welcome to We Hold These Truths, Dr. Pesta.
Thank you very much for having me today.
So, let's see. Tonight at the Floral Street School, 47 Floral Street in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts at 7 o'clock. Dr. Pesta will be speaking, and tomorrow night in Wyndham, at the Wyndham Town Hall, he'll be speaking again at 7 o'clock. So if you like what you hear gather your neighbors and go and visit, go attend, because you definitely want to be able to take advantage of his expertise. So Dr. Pestis, let's go back a little bit and talk about, how did you get involved with Common Core?
Well, as a university professor for the last 20 years, it was very discouraging to me. By the time these kids got to me, they were anti-American, they despised their country, they had lost whatever faith they had been raised with. And so it just sort of occurred to me that if we were going to try to turn this around and give them a proper education, we had to get to them a little sooner. And no sooner did I get involved with Freedom Project, which was basically it's a homeschool program for moms and dads to try to help them get a transition from out of the public schools. No sooner did I get involved than Common Core came down the road, and it was immediate. From the first time I saw it, about 11 months ago, I first heard the words Common Core, and in studying on it, it was pretty dangerous, and so the rest is history. I started giving some talks around Wisconsin, and now we're at 180 talks in 32 different states. New Hampshire's our 32nd state we've visited to try to warn people about what's coming with Common Core.
And just let's get back up a little bit. Where did it theoretically come from?
Well, Common Core is, first people need to realize it's an extension. It's not something really all that new. We've had this kind of outcome-based education, this high-stakes testing, this one-size-fits-all educational paradigm going all the way back to the foundation of the Department of Education and before. So it's not new. Common Core is, the worst aspects of it are what changes now. It goes back to 2008, 2009. Bill and Melinda Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, put up a couple $1 billion now in the last 6 years to promote it and pay for it. It was written by a small handful of lobbyists with deep ties to the federal government. The people who own the copyright for Common Core are utterly unaccountable to you and me and the taxpayers. So this is kind of a banana republic move. The people who own the curriculum standards that are beginning to transform public education, we can't reach them through the ballot box. And so what happened was then the federal government, of course, came in 2008 or 2009, the Race to the Top program, where they basically bribed 46 states to take a set of curriculum standards that they really hadn't even seen yet by handing out billions and billions of dollars of federal money to get the states to take it for their education budgets. And the only proviso to taking that Race to the Top money was you have to take the Common Core standards when they're finally written.
Well, you know what, we have a little bit of a difference in observation there. I do believe that the real problem is that you could, if you took Common Core, then you qualified to be able to compete for the Race to the Top money, which is what New Hampshire did, but New Hampshire did not receive any of that Race to the Top money. And as a donor state, which we are, it just amazes me how many times we will turn around and say, okay, we're going to go compete for this money, or we'll accept this money, but without ever thinking about how much is that costing us. How much money does it cost you and I, the taxpayers, to be able to get this money back in the form of some grant or handout that has strings attached to it, requirements, rules, regulations that we have to abide by. Plus, on top of that, most of the time, there's a stipulation in there that you have to match that money with $2 for every dollar that you get. So that's costing us even more. Why in the world we don't get rid of the Department of Education, I don't know, but that's and probably another story and another adventure.
Well, what you say is true. There were plenty of states in the union that didn't receive initial Race to the Top money, but any state that accepted Common Core has money coming into the state from outside sources to help implement it. And your long-term point is exactly correct. Like everything else the federal government does, once they seed these new big programs with their money, within a few years it becomes the entire responsibility of the state to pick up all that slack, and it's going to end up costing billions and billions of dollars to implement.
Right. Now, what are the some of the fundamentals that you're seeing as the big red flags that caused you to say, wait a minute, something's wrong here?
The biggest problem with Common Core, like I said, and you go back to the Department of Education, you're exactly right, that whenever you have a big federal bureaucracy like that, its purpose is to justify its own existence, and all the money they get. And so over the last 50 years, you've seen increasing federalization of education. I think what really stands apart from Common Core is that for 40, 50 years in this country, our kids have been being taught their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. But while they're being taught those, they've also been pushed left, right? They've been getting more and more indoctrination. They've been getting more and more ideology worked into the curriculum. But it's always been a situation where the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s have kind of been the primary thing. I think the big change with Common Core is now for the first time, how we teach our kids, the pedagogy, the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, it's much less important now than the ideology. That Common Core marks the first time that all of this ideological stuff that we've been seeing for 50 years. Now it becomes the purpose of education. If you ask me in one word what Common Core is, I would say statism. It's the market decision to try to teach your kids that they belong first and foremost to government. Not to families, moms and dads, not to the religious traditions in which they are raised, but to the government.
Which is why we start seeing parents being arrested and put in jail because they objected to the curriculum that their children were being taught. I don't know if you've seen that in a couple of different places, but we have a New Hampshire case now.
Right, a father was taken away in handcuffs basically because he was protesting the softcore pornography that they are feeding to middle school students. And this is it. And when you look at the kind of curriculum decisions, the thing that's so shocking about Common Core is that there's so much violence, there's so much sex in what they're reading, there's so much government propaganda. Many people I know throughout New Hampshire have heard about the exemplar texts that are government, global warming, Environmental Protection Agency pamphlets, President Obama's own executive orders now being funneled into English class. So these kids, instead of reading the great literary tradition of the last 2,000 years, the Judeo-Christian values that come with it, they're reading government propaganda. And so you really are getting a situation here where the influence of government, promoting government, supersedes every other aspect of what Common Core does.
Right, and so now, you talk about the fact that they're getting away from the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. I find that that's pretty evident in the primary grades. Why in the world we're pushing a social agenda at kindergarten is beyond me, and yet that seems to be what we do. And if you really go back in history and look at when our children really got their literacy, it's in the first three grades. If they haven't got it by 3rd grade, then you need to really be doing some serious remedial work with those children so that they're not at a disadvantage. Hence why instead of the 90% literacy rate today, we now have, about 50? Because we aren't teaching those children at that age, which in essence leans over to child abuse in some respects.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. This is child abuse. The ideologues and the activists who have decided that we're going to start going after 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds with sex education, 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds trying to promote mainstream radical homosexual agendas in terms of activism. We've decided to do this now, and they realize that when you're dealing with kids that young, you're not teaching them, you're implanting things in their heads. We are getting away from trying to teach kids the building blocks of basic math and English literacy. And now we're substituting politics and we're substituting all sorts of sociology for those kids, knowing full well that by the time they get to be 10 and 12 and 14, they will already have been so prepared to receive the big government message that they won't even question it.
Well, Dr. Blumenfeld has said often that we have created some of our what do they call them? They're not disabilities. Are they disabilities? And when we've created situations because we're not giving the kids those little tools to unlock their world, because we're more focused on indoctrinating them rather than teaching them, that we're creating some of the behavior problems that we're seeing now.
Right, you're seeing all sorts of dysfunctions and syndromes now from kids who are being quite traumatized and scarred by being exposed to ideas and philosophies that they can't handle. Also, you're getting much more in the schools now, particularly at the lowest grades, a concerted effort to pit school authority versus parental authority. So the kids are coming home from school now and they're being groomed to challenge the beliefs of the parents. They're being told that what they're learning in school supersedes what mom and dad has to say. That's why moms and dads are starting to complain that homework's not coming home, textbooks aren't coming home. The schools are becoming much more insular. As this poor gentleman from New Hampshire found out, and if you dare go to a school board meeting and spend 20 seconds longer than you should objecting to pornography in middle school, well, they'll take you away in handcuffs.
Right, and by the way, Guilford has instituted a new policy. If you are a parent that's not happy with your curriculum, you must go to the school superintendent, to the school principal, you cannot come to the school board meeting, which is supposed to be open, which is taxpayer money going to those people anyway. Put that aside, don't worry about the taxpayer funding part of that, but the fact of the matter is the only way you can remedy anything is supposedly behind closed doors. But we have the example from, I think it was 2005, when David Parker down in Massachusetts tried to object to his kindergartner being read a certain homosexual agenda book. And he was meeting privately and was taken away in handcuffs and jailed, and fought that all the way up to the Supreme Court and lost. So it is very, very obvious that they now think that these children are not the parents, and that they do belong to the state. And makes a great advertisement for homeschooling and why it's so important to keep those reins close to home.
Absolutely, and that's a strategy. That's a concerted strategy on the part of the Common Core classroom. When moms and dads object, you don't talk about it publicly, you don't speak about it in meetings, you don't have teachers and principals and superintendents do group meetings with the community. It's always one-on-one. You bring a mom or a dad into your office, you isolate them, and you tell them why nobody believes what you believe, you're an outlier, everyone's happy, everyone loves this curriculum, and one by one you try to shut them down. And you're absolutely right. Common Core is the single greatest advocacy for homeschooling ever to come down the road. The problem is, even homeschool moms and dads really have to fight this, because once they get this kind of complete control, once the Common Core web is in place with all the standardized national testing and everything that goes on in the classroom having to be geared to the national standards that are controlled out of Washington, when that happens and they get all that control over our public school kids, do you really think they're going to not turn around and say, hey, now you got this entire group of homeschoolers that's growing by leaps and bounds. We cannot allow moms and dads to keep kids in the house and to do because that's the exact problem, is that moms and dads own their kids. Homeschooling is the single biggest threat to that existentially, as it grows by leaps and bounds. So when they get the public schools the way they want them, they're going to have to turn their attention to the homeschoolers.
Well, and are they not already laying the groundwork when they rewrite the testing and the assessments that they're putting forward? The interesting thing is that this is not new. I've been fighting this for 20 years because when we first arrived in this great state of New Hampshire, that I absolutely love and think is the greatest state in the Union. But when we first arrived here, that's exactly what I started running into at the local school system, where the extracurricular book that we picked out for my daughter from our home shelves was vetoed by the classroom teacher, and she was given a book that was totally inappropriate for a young person to be reading, pre-pubescent, I should say, as well. And we're giving her a book that I might have okayed at a high school level, but not generally so. So we sent it back, and I said, this is inappropriate, we're not accepting it. So we got an Anne Frank type book back, but the problem is the questions that you would answer to assess the book by the student was all dark. There was nothing that held this young lady up as being brave and doing those attributes that you would attribute to someone who was standing against violence and other things being done to them. And so this kind of thing has been going on for quite some time. And when we fought the school district down in Amherst and Mount Vernon, we also ran into what they had then, they called the Delphi technique, basically. Stacking a committee in which they invite the minority, or what appears to be the minority, onto the committee, so that you have the majority of them. Now that you've met with them for 6 months or longer, you do buy into the solution because you realize that you've been outvoted. And and coming into the classroom, I'm convinced there's this red light that goes off in the school that says there's a parent in the building. Watch out, parent in the building. Because I did hear as a parent that exact term. You're the only one who's ever come in here and been unhappy with this situation.
Yeah, if you pay attention to the news at all, we have got moms and dads all over this country screaming bloody murder about what's going on with their kids, and yet every one of them, I've been in 32 states now, and I agree with you, New Hampshire's got to be one of the prettiest, right? So I'm with you on that. But you got moms and dads screaming bloody murder about this, and they're all being pulled aside privately and told, you're crazy, nobody thinks the way you do, you're in the way, everybody else loves this curriculum. It's very Orwellian. We've reached the point with public education where they feel comfortable enough to lie in your face and assume nothing, there will be no consequences. And that's why I think you're beginning to see people being arrested, people being carried out, because the lies aren't working. The simple, glib lies, the confidence the public schools have that moms and dads are going to turn their kids over to us and then utterly forget about what goes on in our schools. That's beginning to get challenged. And so when they're pushed by this, the only answer they have is arrest that man. How dare this dad try to defend his daughter from this? How dare you, as a mom, tell the school that you're not accepting the book we're having your kid read? And so they start to really lose it a little bit, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And as the young lady said, this very astute young woman who's has been well taught at home, I've got to say, turned around and said, you know, I am absolutely appalled that at the first threat to your existence that you would resort to violence. And she couldn't have said it better if she tried. So now, the other thing that concerns me about Common Core, however, is this database that they're collecting. And it seems like I had a young woman in a couple of weeks ago talking about vaccines, and she promotes vaccine choice in the state of New Hampshire. But what they're also doing through vaccines is this registry for immunizations. They're not doing anything too far from that with Common Core, right?
Well, Common Core, one of the underlying principles is that we're going to radically data mine the kids, starting from the earliest grades. We're going to keep, when you and I went to school, the only thing that ever appeared on our transcript was our final grades. Now, every teacher comment, every conduct comment, every grade, every assignment, this becomes part of your kid's permanent record for the rest of their lives. And the federal government has already made it clear they want to make all of this information available to employers one day. So when your kid goes to get a job, under Obamacare, your daughter's a child till she's 27, right?
Right.
So I guess at 28, when she goes to get her first job, she's now not a child. The employer, who's going to have hundreds of applicants for these jobs, is going to be able to see what your daughter did in 2nd, 4th, and 5th grade. And this could be really problematic in the sense, well, first of all, why in the world does somebody who's got a college degree have to be subject to this kind of lifelong scrutiny by an employer? But what if your daughter was a little dyslexic in 4th grade, or she had ADHD, or she was on Ritalin for some made-up syndrome, right? This becomes now a way that you'll be able to discriminate in applications. Oh, well, 20 years ago your daughter couldn't read very well, or she had dyslexia, and maybe we ought to go with another candidate. And Bill Gates, who's paid for Common Core basically, he's a big proponent of this. He came out in the newspaper about a month ago, and now he wants to data mine college kids too. It doesn't stop at elementary, middle, and high school kids. He said, we need to data mine these college kids. We need to start taking all of this detailed information on them and track them. They continue to data mine them for 10 years after they graduate college, so we can assess which professors are doing their jobs and which universities are succeeding, and it's become a total technocracy that we're moving towards.
Right, and really, is it really are we so foolish as to think that it really is going to be to assess the professors? I mean, I feel like I want to go around and say, is there a stupid sign hanging on my forehead?
Well, ask yourself, you have your listeners ask themselves one question. How many of your listeners actually believe the NSA spying program on Americans is really just to fight terrorism? It's absurd to think that, and it's equally absurd to think that they're gathering all this information on your kids simply to try to tweak what's not working in the schools. It just defies logic.
Right. Well, and Common Core Bill Gates actually paid a couple of organizations that sound like they're federal or that they're government organizations, and in reality they're private organizations, is that right?
Yeah, they're lobbyist groups. The two organizations responsible are the NGA, the National Governors Association, and the CCSSO. the Council of Chief State School Officers. Those are august titles. When you hear the word National Governors Association, you think to yourself, well, gee, that's a good idea. 50 state governors locked themselves in a room and banged out education standards. Well, we'll stop for it. Now, I wish that would have happened. It would have been better than what we've got. But what qualifies your state governors to write education theory?
Exactly.
One of the more conservative governors in the whole country, Scott Walker, and I love him, but he's not the least bit qualified, and neither is your governor to write any kind of education standard. And at least if that had happened, and you didn't like the Common Core standards, then you could vote your governor out of office. These two Washington lobbyist groups, the NGA and the CCSSO, who received all this money from Gates, they wrote these standards behind closed doors, they did it privately, and they own the copyright. The standards are copyrighted by these two lobbyist groups, which means if we object to them as a people, if the entire country begins to dislike them, you have no electoral way to reach these people or to access that copyright. This is banana republic stuff. It's the federal government of the United States, because of this copyright, technically doesn't own the standards that are transforming our schools. How did we allow this to happen?
Right, and as Dr. Terrence Moore from Hillsdale College constantly asks, where is this in practice so that we can see whether it works or fails? And so far, I'm not sure that there's any place that it has actually been in a situation where we see any assessment at all yet.
No, your kids are guinea pigs. There's nothing in Common Core that has ever been really tried before in terms of how they measure and test and data mine. This is all new. And you hit on something very perceptive. We asked a moment ago, why is it that the teachers are so secretive? Why is it that the schools are so, the Delphi technique, why are they dividing and conquering and keeping this all a mystery? Well, one of the reasons they're doing it is because that's exactly how the program at the federal level was implemented. It was implemented behind closed doors. Say what you will about Obamacare. I find it pretty reprehensible, but say what you will about it. It had its hearing in the House and the Senate. It went to the Supreme Court. Common Core has never had any of this. It's never been voted on. Moms and dads never saw it before it was put in. You don't see I've given 180 of these talks, and other people. Sandy Stotsky has been fantastic about this. Jim Milgram, going all across the country explaining why it's bad. They don't do, the pro-Common Core people aren't out there doing this. They're not explaining to the moms and dads and the parents why this matters, why it's useful, why it's good. You get these same talking points that emanate out of Washington, and your zombie-like, your principals and superintendents repeat them like a mantra whenever anybody comes to complain. And meanwhile, you got moms and dads who are common sense moms and dads seeing how impactful this is being in a negative way, clamoring for answers. That's why I'm just a little college professor from Wisconsin. That's why they keep having me come, because no one's explaining this. The people who are for it will not defend it.
Right, exactly. And the other part I see happening, and one of the things that you mentioned early on was that, I'm going to lose it. I lost that thought. We'll go on to the next thought. But at any rate, one of the things too that we've got a question, and you're pointing it out, is that parents are the ones who are raising the roof on it. The parents are getting involved. And I must say to every parent in our listening audience, you are your child's best advocate. Nobody else cares about your child the way you do, and whether or not they succeed, and how their problems, and nobody knows your child like you do. So I implore you to please get involved in this and come and understand it. We're talking with Dr. Duke Pesta, and he is from the University of, no, you're actually from the Freedom Project Education.
And the University of Wisconsin as well.
Oh, you are from, okay, I almost blew that one. But he will be tonight at the Floral Street School at 47 Floral Street in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. Say that fast 10 times. At 7 o'clock. And tomorrow night he will be here in New Hampshire at the Windham Town Hall in Windham, New Hampshire at 7 o'clock. So
free admission.
Be sure that you make sure that you're there. If you need more information, you want to look this up, look at F as in Frank, P as in Paul, E as in Europe, USA.org, FPEUSA.org. That's actually for the Freedom Project Education USA.
And another place you can go, we're being hosted by and doing the good work, the local John Birch Society. If you go to jbs.org.com, you will be able to find all of the schedule information as well. And So there's a lot of good people behind this, and a lot of people very concerned for a lot of years about education. So either FPE or JBS, and all of these talks are free and open to the public, by the way, too. It doesn't cost you anything. And so you can come either to Wyndham tomorrow or Shrewsbury tonight, and we're going to give you a nice long program. And the first thing we do is we explain in very great detail where Common Core came from, so there are no misunderstandings, and then we work our way through the standards and why the standards are ineffective, and so it's a pretty comprehensive program.
Right. I think it's very interesting too that you did allude to it earlier that it is nothing more than a new rendition of outcome-based education, and I, having been on the ground floor with trying to fight that here in the state of New Hampshire, I am very well aware, and I often tell people, it's been renamed. You have any opportunity where it starts to sound like people are objecting to a particular terminology, and they change it.
Well, it's even more alarming than that. Yes, Common Core is exactly that. I like to define Common Core as No Child Left Behind on steroids. The worst aspects of No Child Left Behind, the things that we hated about it. And every liberal progressive teacher and principal and superintendent I've ever met hated No Child Left Behind. And so what did they do? They took the worst aspects of No Child Left Behind, outcome-based education, meaningless standardized testing, and they put it all in Common Core, and they renamed it. And it's even worse than that, though. Common Core is branding so badly after a couple years that the next standards, math and English are already in. The science curriculum is about to be put in. So badly is Common Core as a term branding that the libs in Washington have changed the name. It's not Common Core science now, it's next generation science. So already they're changing the names of their own program to try to make it seem like it's not what people are objecting to.
Right, and isn't that what they did with Smarter Balance too?
Absolutely, and I always make the joke in my talk that they call things like Obamacare the Affordable Care Act, because how in the world could you be against affordability? I mean, think about it. If you oppose Obamacare, you want people to die in the streets. If you oppose the latest feminist abortion objective, then it's a war on women. And if you are against Common Core, you just don't want standards. You just want our kids, as if somehow education has never been about standards till Common Core. We've been giving grades and tests and assessments for 200 years in this country.
Oh, but we're destroying competition
That's
because we
right.
do not want anybody to feel bad.
That's exactly right.
Of course, you get out in the real world, and the first time they get turned down on their job application, they're in a fetal position in the corner, right? On We Hold These Truths. This is Karen Testerman on WSMN 1590, and we're talking with Dr. Duke Pesta, who is going to be offering 2 lectures for you on Common Core. One here, tonight at the Floral Street School in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts at 7 o'clock, and the other tomorrow night in Wyndham at the town hall there at 7 o'clock. So this is very, very important for you if you've not had any opportunity, if you have friends who haven't quite gotten the idea about what's going on. I do know that there are many, many people around the state who are objecting and doing everything they can, but we still do have school board members who say, oh, you just don't understand these, they're state standards. I don't understand how they're not seeing the fact that if this is a state standard from Wisconsin and a state standard from California and a state standard in New Hampshire, that they're all just that state's new idea.
Are these the same school boards that are now prohibiting you from talking to them about Common Core? That you got to go to the superintendent? Is that the same? Yeah, so you see the problem here, right? That the school board members they're nonplussed that you would actually try to discuss this at a public school board meeting. So they're directing you to the school superintendents. Meanwhile, but that doesn't stop them from blithely pointing out all this ridiculous misinformation that they don't want to be educated about. Ask yourself that question, the one you just brought up. When the national tests kick in, how in the world is New Hampshire going to be free to teach things that aren't a part of that test? If the only way your teachers are being evaluated, the only way these standards can be assessed is through the national tests. Bill Gates himself, the guy who paid for this, back in 2009, he said, and I quote, "Once the tests line up with the standards, the curriculum will follow." I mean, he made it abundantly clear that, New Hampshire, you're going to get your first state test, your national tests, next spring. So whatever you think is going on in your schools now, and however much state and local autonomy you think you have, wait till the tests kick in. they already kicked in New York. New York is one of those states that's had Common Core for 2 years longer than New Hampshire. And lo and behold, why did the New York State Teachers Union, and New York, now let me give you those words, New York State Teachers Union. There's no way you can take those 5 words and turn them into conservatism, right? It's not possible. In January of this year, the New York State Teachers Union called for a halt to the implementation of Common Core. Why? Because they had seen that for all the talk about autonomy and state and control, after the first year's tests, they figured out that, oh my God, we're going to have to teach just what's on the tests. That's one of the reasons why the New York State, the Chicago Teachers Union, right, another hotbed of right-wingery, right? The Chicago Teachers Union last month demanded an immediate pull-out of Common Core. And so you're beginning to see now not just right-wing and conservative groups who are beginning to oppose this, but those on the extreme left now are coming in, which is, this is unparalleled that the right and the left are having this kind of an alliance. How about the Occupy Wall Street movement? They are adamantly opposed to Common Core. Why? Because the a very few small crony capitalist companies like Pearson Publishing, who gets paid, by the way, you know that your Common Core tests, they're not written by teachers. The Common Core tests are written by Pearson Publishing. The publishing house that's making money off the Common Core textbooks, they get to administer the exams, they get to grade the exams, and they've just won a federal contract. They get paid up to $30, Pearson Publishing, for every single exam your kids take. What's 30 times 60 million? Because that's what Pearson's going to get paid for this. And that's why, you know, real right-wing groups like Occupy Wall Street have joined the conservatives in opposing Common Core.
Wow, that is, I think you just made the case for closing the Department of Education at the national level, because it is terribly corrupt and it's not buying us anything. And, you know, when I remember a time, I'm an educator, and so I remember a time when we used to be told the one thing that we really do want to do is we want every child to reach their potential. It doesn't matter whether you're on the low end of the scale or if you're in the gifted end of the scale. We want you to reach your potential. And then all of a sudden we started teaching to the middle. And now today we're saying you've got to